This is Lecture 72D in the ABCs of Communism series. We're dealing with a volume on South and Southwest Asia and the chapters on Iran. This lecture and the corresponding chapter are called Iran's Ongoing Fight for Communism. The Communist Party of Iran was the Iranian Communist Party founded in June of 1920 in the Bandari Anzali Gilan province, as we have seen. Now, originally in 1917, its founders had called themselves the Justice Party. They were Leninist Social Democrats and part of Stalin's Baku oil field Bolshevik Center. They answered Lenin's call and participated in the formation of the Third International in 1919. In 1920, following Lenin's orders for all groups wishing to affiliate with the Comintern, their Justice Party was renamed the Communist Party of Iran, CPI. Now, Haider Khan-e-Amogli was one of the leaders of the Constitutional Revolution, and he was elected as the Communist Party's General Secretary. Its foundation occurred at the same time as the establishment of the Soviet Republic of Gilan earlier that year by Mirza Kochak Khan and his Jangali, or Foresters Movement, insurgents. In 1921, Iran's capitalist government banned the CPI. This coincided with the defeat of the Soviet Republic of Gilan. Nevertheless, its members continued their activities underground until the foundation of the Tudeh Party in 1941, Tudeh. Thereafter, Tudeh became the official Communist Party in Iran. Now let's take a look at the formation and foundation of the Tudeh Party. The British-Soviet Allied invasion of Iran in 1941-42, which resulted as a consequence of the Nazi attack on the Soviet Union and the importance of opening up a southern route to supply Stalin's forces. At any rate, that invasion resulted in the end of Reza Shah's reign and his forced exile to South Africa. Many political prisoners were subsequently released. In this new atmosphere, nationalist and socialist groups once again flourished. Iraj Akandar and his closest colleagues decided to form a Marxist-Leninist party appealing to the broad masses. So they founded the Tudeh Party on the 29th September of 1941, electing Soliman Mohsen Eskandari as chairman. Now, Stalin wanted the Tudeh Party to be a liberal rather than a radical party as part of the worldwide united front against fascism. Accordingly, the Tudeh Party differed from the hardline Comintern-affiliated, formerly underground CPI. Its platform stressed the importance of constitutional and individual rights, protecting democracy and judicial integrity from fascism, imperialism, and militarism. At Soliman Eskandari's urging, the party initially attempted to appeal to non-secular masses by barring women from membership, organizing Muharram processions observed by Shia and Sunni sects of Islam, and designating a special prayer room in its main clubhouse. This orientation did not last, and the party moved rapidly to the left within months of its founding. So in 1944, the party entered the 14th Majli elections, and the 8 Tudeh candidates were elected. That's Majli, M-A-J-L-I-S, is the Iranian parliament. It also established the secret Tudeh Party Military Organization, TPMO, of Iran, made up of military officers. The TPMO provided intelligence and information from the military to protect the Tudeh from the secret police forces and give it military strength. Now, Iran Eskandari was a French-educated Qajar prince turned communist politician. He was General Secretary of the Tudeh Party of Iran and a member of Parliament. On the 1st of August 1946, he was made Minister of Commerce and Industry in Prime Minister Ervan Ebrahimian Kavam's coalition government. That cabinet composed of men from the Tudeh Communists, Kavam's Democrat Party, and the Iran Party. The Reds in the Broad Front Tudeh Party got 3 ministries: health, culture, and trade and industry. Finance and communication went to 2 royalists, while he gave the police and foreign affairs to his own men from the Democrat Party. Now, the Truman Gang was revving up for war with the USSR and maneuvered against the coalition Kavam had put together. The Shah ordered Kavam to resign on 16 October 1946, and following the resignation, Kavam formed another cabinet without the Tudeh and Iran parties. Now, into the oil field. After 1935, the APOC was established. That's the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC. A 60-year agreement was signed with it in 1933, and that established a flat payment to Iran of 4 British pounds for every ton of crude oil exported, and denied Iran any right to control oil exports. In 1950, ongoing popular demand prompted a vote in the Majlis to nationalize the petroleum industry, and a year later the government of Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh formed the National Iranian Oil Company, NIOC. The Truman Gang strikes again. In 1953, the CIA, assisted by MI6, organized, that is paid and suborned, for a coup that ousted the Mossadegh government and paved the way for a new oil agreement. The reason was the desire of the gringo oil monopolies to get in on the action, and not just Anglo-Iranian. It was Mexico all over again, but this time in Southwest Asia. In 1954, a new agreement divided profits equally between the NIOC, the National Iranian Oil Company, and a U.S.-led multinational consortium, so that in 1973, Iran signed a new 20-year concession with the restructured U.S. consortium. Now there was trouble all over the place. By 1958, many of Iran's international oil agreements had not produced the expected fines and revenues. Those oil companies that had successfully extracted oil contributed very little to the country's total oil production. By the time of the Islamic Revolution of 1978-79, the 5 largest international companies accounted for only 10.4% of total oil production. During this period, Iran's oil industry remained disconnected from other industries, particularly manufacturing. This separation promoted inefficiencies in the country's overall industrial economy, which was intentional on the part of the U.S. oil caps, who wanted to contract with their own service companies. In 1973, at a time when Iran was the second largest oil exporter in the world, and the Arab-Israeli War of October 6 to 25th was pressurizing the price of oil, the Shah of Iran told the New York Times, quote, "Of course the world price of oil is going to rise. Western nations increase the price of wheat, you sell us by 300%, and the same for sugar and cement. You buy our crude oil and sell it back to us as refined as petrochemicals at 100 times the price you paid for it. It's only fair that from now on you should pay more for oil, let's say 10 times more." The puppet was getting obstreperous. Following the CIA coup of 1953, the Shah had been obedient. The people were sharing in nothing, and there was growing anger against the U.S. and its imposed political tyranny. This inevitably led to the 1979 revolution. The mass of Kulak, that is mullah-based Islamic revolutionary movement, effectively channeled the popular anger. And as you know, the result was the establishment of an Islamic Republic. That is, a political system that included a religiously clear parliamentary democracy. In other words, a theocratic parliament vetted and supervised by a Shia Muslim supreme leader. The CIA arranged for Iraq to attack the Iranian Republic during the 1980s, and that war lasted nearly 9 years, with massive casualties for both sides, not to mention a very high monetary cost. The CIA, unhinged by the success of the Islamic Revolution, began to agitate for U.S. war against Iran, using its nuclear program as the excuse. The Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, an agreement reached between Iran and the P5+1, was created on July 14, 2015, aimed at loosening the nuclear sanctions in exchange for Iran's restriction in producing enriched uranium. The CIA never wanted this program, and in league with the Israelis continued its campaign to start a U.S.-Iran war. Nevertheless, Iran is a major regional power with the world's fourth largest oil and gas reserves. In 2018, it was the world's largest gas supplier. And meanwhile, in 1943, the Tudeh Party took a strong stand in favor of women's rights. This included advocating for equal pay for equal work, 2 months of maternity leave for female workers, and otherwise standing for women's social rights. It allied with those who had been fighting for these goals for years and were socialist. Even so, issues of reproduction, sexuality, and other elements within family life were not discussed. However, from this point on, the party grew immensely and became a major force in Iranian politics. By early 1945, the party had managed to create the first mass organization in Iran's history. Police records later revealed it had an estimated 2,200 hardcore members, 700 of them in Tehran. The cops said there were thousands of sympathizers in its youth. Tens of thousands, I should say. And in its youth and women's organizations, and hundreds of thousands of sympathizers in its labor and craft unions. Its main newspaper, Rosboroughs, which means leader, boasted a circulation of more than 100,000, triple that of the semi-official newspaper, Etelat. British Ambassador Reader Bullard called it the only coherent political force in the country, and the New York Times reckoned it and its allies could win as much as 40% of the vote in a fair election. The prestige of the USSR aided the Reds of the Tudeh parties and its mass organizations. After the end of World War II, the CIA attack on Iran tried to stir up resentment over Soviet demands for petroleum concessions in northern Iran and the Soviet sponsoring of ethnic revolts in Kurdistan and Azerbaijan, despite the fact that Tudeh deputies of the Majlis had previously vigorously demanded the nationalization of the whole petroleum industry. The Tudeh party supported granting the Soviet petroleum industry in Iran its wishes on grounds of socialist solidarity, internationalism, and anti-imperialism. The Cold War. During this time, the rest of the international communist movement was also thriving. The communist world expanded dramatically in the decade following World War II, with Eastern Europe, China, North Korea, and Vietnam all becoming communist governed. Now, the gringo imperialists set their sights on getting Iranian oil and gas, and overthrew the Mossadegh government. The CIA established Operation TP Be Damn in the late 1940s, which was Tudeh Party Be Damned, funded at $1 million a year, which was a lot more in 1948 than it is now. It prepared a propaganda translated into Persian that portrayed the Soviet Union and the Tudeh as anti-Iranian or anti-Islamic. No end of lies were published and broadcast into Iran, telling of the harsh reality of life in the Soviet Union. Iranians were told that the Tudeh party's close relationship with the Soviets and its Popular Front strategy was a great danger. In addition, the gringos paid right-wing nationalist organizations and some Shia religious figures. CIA agents provoked violent acts and blamed them on the communists, and hired thugs to break up Tudeh rallies. Nonetheless, the party was able to fill the streets of Iran and Abadan with tens of thousands of enthusiastic demonstrators for May Day in 1946. In February 1949, the CIA staged an attempt on the life of Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. The party was blamed by the government and banned. The government confiscated its assets, dissolved affiliated organizations, especially the Central Council, and rounded up some 200 leaders and cadres. By 1950, the party, continuing to function underground, had organized its supporters under the banner of the Iran Society for Peace and was publishing 3 daily papers, Razm, Mardam, and Besi Ayande. In December 1950, the TPMO, its military organization, managed to arrange for escape of key members of the party leadership who had been in jail since early 1949. The CIA countered by organizing Iranian reactionaries who hated the Tudeh party. One Iranian conservative newspaper editorialized that the Tudeh party, with its satanic doctrine of class struggles, had incited ignorant workers to violate the sacred right of private property and inflict social anarchy upon the center of the country. This uprising proves that Tudeh is an enemy of private property, of Iran, and of Islam. If the government does not stamp out Tudeh, the local revolt will inevitably spread into a general revolution. Now, about Mohammad Mossadegh. Following World War II, Iranian public support was growing for nationalization of the British Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC, whose profits had greatly exceeded its royalty payments to the Iranian government. In June 1950, an article in the Red Daily Mardam describes the effects of Mossadegh's policy thusly. Already, we can be sure that revisions in the Southern Oil Contract will not be in favor of our people and will only result in the consolidation of England's position in our country. The solution of the oil question is related to the victory of our party, that is, to the victory of the people of Iran. Now, in 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh, head of the nationalist movement known as the National Front of Iran, led parliament in the nationalization of AIOC, the Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, and shortly after was appointed prime minister by the Shah. Mossadegh oversaw the takeover of British oil facilities and rising economic difficulty and polarization in Iran as the AIOC withdrew its employees and retaliated with a boycott of Iranian oil. In early April of 1951, the Tudeh revealed its true strength by launching strikes and riots and protesting low wages and bad housing in the oil industry and delays in nationalization of that industry. There were street demonstrations and sympathy strikes in Tehran, Isfahan, and the northern cities. Police opened fire on demonstrators. A result was panic in Iran's parliament at the power of Marxist forces in Iran. With this, it is clear that not only was Mossadegh not a communist, but Tudeh did not control the government or want to overthrow him, even as he was establishing a broad public base. Now, during this period, the Tudeh party followed a leftist rather than a popular front strategy, refusing to ally with Mossadegh, despite the fact that Mossadegh had introduced a new policy of tolerance toward the party, and both the Tudeh and Mossadegh had worked for nationalization of AIOC, and that expropriation of capitalist Western-owned resources, extracting corporations by poor countries, was necessary. Now, all of what was central to Marxist-Leninist doctrine had been offered, but the party vigorously and relentlessly opposed Mossadegh and his program. On July 16, 1956, Mossadegh resigned after the Shah refused to accept his nomination for a war minister. Now, Mossadegh took his cue from Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser, who had pioneered the use of the newly invented, mass-produced and cheap transistor radio to mobilize the street. Mossadegh appealed to the public for support. However, the Tudeh press continued to attack him, describing his differences with the Shah as merely one between different factions of a reactionary ruling elite. It was only after the explosion of popular support for Mossadegh in the street that many rank-and-file Tudeh party members could see firsthand Mossadegh's popularity and came to his aid. When it did, the Tudeh party played an important part, perhaps even the most important part. In the rallies between March 1952, one-third of the demonstrators had been Tudeh and two-thirds had been National Front. After March 1952, the proportions were reversed. Ayatollah Abu Qasim Kashani, who later switched sides and supported the Shah, sent a public letter to the pro-Tudeh organizations thanking them for their invaluable contribution during the uprising toward Mossadegh's victory. Mossadegh capitalized on the uprising to establish emergency rule, which allowed him to bypass the modules and to institute socialist reforms. The Truman Gang had plans that were more important in mind than getting involved in Iran, and were refusing demands to overthrow Mossadegh from Clement Attlee and Winston Churchill. The CIA plan for Iran would require the 1953 inauguration of Dwight Eisenhower to change that tune and greenlight the coup operation. Now, more on the 1953 CIA coup. During this time, the CIA became increasingly frustrated with Mossadegh, and the U.S. ambassador questioned Mossadegh's mental stability. As the gringos gave up hope on Mossadegh, their propaganda and covert action campaign against the Tudeh party, called TP Be Damned, expanded to include him. In 1953, the CIA and MI6 were confronting the facts of the Burgess McLean defections. Kim Philby, the MI6 C or M to B, in de facto custody, and the 1948 Czechoslovakia voting in of a red regime was still burning in their memory. So they launched their plan to overthrow Mossadegh before it was too late. The Tudeh also sensed a coup was coming, and they created vanguard cells that, along with the TPMO, identified key military installations, army depots, and command and control centers in the capital, Tehran, that were to react violently to any coup attempt. The Tudeh organized huge demonstrations in August 1953 before the CIA coup occurred. Now, the CIA's first attempt involved persuading the Shah to issue an edict dismissing Mossadegh and replacing him with retired General Fazollah Zahedi, while arresting Mossadegh and taking over other possible centers of opposition. In other words, the CIA men just grabbed Mossadegh, and he never actually got out of that. And on 15 August 1953, Tudeh supporters in the military uncovered the CIA plots, and the thugs the gringos sent to Mossadegh were themselves intercepted and arrested. Colonel Mohammad Ali Mosbashiri was a member of the TPMO's secret three-man secretariat and an active member of Tehran's military governor's office, the center of the coup operation. Major Hadi Homouni served in the Shah's Imperial Guard. He discovered and reported the August plot to the party. The CIA responded by sending suborned Shah demonstrators to sack the pro-Tudeh and pro-Mossadegh establishments. This first and ill-fated coup attempt created a backlash against its perpetrators, including the Shah. The already anti-monarchical Tudeh supporters were radicalized, and on the morning of 17 August 1953, an angry crowd began to attack symbols of the monarchy, demanding its abolition. Mossadegh, who had worked to limit the power of the Shah, but had never suggested that he was in favor of abolishing the constitutional monarchy, saw these attacks as a challenge intended to do just that. The next day, his regime ordered the army into the streets, and 600 mid- and low-level Tudeh activists were arrested in Tehran. The party reversed course again and ordered a demobilization of its preparations to fight a coup. Both Mossadegh and the Tudeh party had fucked up and given the CIA what it needed to save its coup, and turned things in favor of the gringo regime and its oilmen. On 17 August 1953, party militants had inadvertently helped destabilize the government by staging demonstrations to pressure Mossadegh to declare Iran a democratic republic. As this would have overturned Iran's constitutional monarchy, Mossadegh reacted by calling out troops to suppress the demonstrators. The party then demobilized late the next day, making it unavailable to fight the coup the day after. The CIA manager Kermit Roosevelt had seized the momentary opportunity and used his own men to seize Mossadegh and imprison him. On 19 August 1953, taking advantage, the CIA and its Iranian stooges struck again. This time, their coup d'etat replaced Mossadegh with Zahedi. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was well paid, along with the coups, and given dictatorial powers by Kermit Roosevelt, the CIA boss of operations. The newly bought Shah banned most political groups, including Mossadegh's National Front, forcing it and the Tudeh party underground. The Tudeh party played an important role, both directly and indirectly, during that pivotal Iranian history, beginning with the 1951 nationalization of British Anglo-Iranian Oil Company, AIOC. As we have seen, the CIA response had been to pour millions of dollars into bribes, leading to the 1953 overthrow of Mohammad Mossadegh by a CIA-led coup. The Tudeh party's policy fluctuated, first attacking Mossadegh as an agent of American imperialism, then giving him some support, and after the July 52 uprising. On 15 August of 53, a coup attempt against Mossadegh was thwarted, thanks in part to information uncovered by the Tudeh TPMO military network. Between 1953 and 1957, the CIA's new Iranian security forces used their code cracking and by brute force tracked down and killed 4,121 party members. This constituted the whole Tudeh underground and a good number of the best party cadre. The coups said the Tudeh party had infiltrated the military via the TPMO and arrested 477 members of the armed forces, including 22 colonels, 69 majors, 100 captains, 193 lieutenants, and 19 NCOs, and 63 military cadets. Ironically, a Tudeh colonel had been in charge of the Shah's personal security, as well as that of Vice President Richard Nixon when he visited Iran. The Tudeh had had the opportunity to assassinate the Shah and the U.S. Vice President and failed to use it, despite the fact that, backed by military officers with access to weapons, the Tudeh had a strong hand. By 1957, the TPMO had been decimated. Many high and middle-ranking Tudeh leaders were arrested or forced to flee the country, and the arrest and execution of Khosrow Ruzbeh in 1957-58 signaled the CIA's final victory. After the fact, the party engaged in self-criticism of its policies toward Mossadegh at its fourth plenum held in Moscow in July 1957. There they found the sectarian and leftist policies of the Communist Party of Iran and failing to recognize the progressive nature of the oil nationalization movement. Two lines in the international communist movement. The revolutionary versus revisionist split in the international communist movement was reflected in the division of the Tudeh party. We have consistently reviewed the effect of the Khrushchev gang's coup against the Leninists in Moscow, need not do it again, except to say now that in 1965, the Tudeh party divided between those advocating violent struggle against the government by arming the tribes of southern Iran and those opposed to that. In 1966, several party members, including Ali Kavari and Parviz Hekmatshu of the Central Committee, and Asef Ravzdidi and Saber Mohammadzadeh, were arrested and sentenced to death. The backlash forced the government to reduce the sentences to life imprisonment. These events created more international sympathy for the worker struggle in Iran and helped unify the party after the split. The Tudeh party from this point on was one of Iran's strongest underground movements and helped pave the way for the forthcoming Iranian Revolution of 1979. Now, about that revolution. In 1970, the Iranian guerrilla movement began in northern Iran in the province of Mazandaran. Along the way, the party organized widespread worker strikes and demonstrations, and university campuses became a hotbed of revolutionary activity. In 1973, the Tudeh party released a brochure titled, quote, "Oil from Iran and Imperialist Oil Monopolies," unquote, advocating oil nationalization. The Tudeh party successfully increased its recruiting of young people and organized regional committees supporting the Islamic Revolution when others on the left opposed it. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution got underway. Many political prisoners were freed, and the Tudeh Party and other leftist groups were able to participate in the presidential and parliamentary election for the first time in many years. However, the Islamic Republican Party of Ayatollah Beheshti won the majority of seats in the Majlis, and other nationalist organizations were left out. The newly elected president, Abul Hassan Bani Sadr, who had originally been close with Khomeini, turned against him. The Tudeh Party recognized that Amnesty International had been taken over by the CIA and that their call to end the summary executions was a blatant interference in Iranian affairs. And this brings us to the Rosboroughs Tehran jailbreak on 11th of February 1979. Now, in December 1978, two EDS executives, that is Electronic Data Services, in Dallas, Texas, was their headquarters, working in pre-revolutionary Tehran on computerizing the health system, were arrested on suspicion of bribery. Bail was set at $13 million US. When H. Rosborough, head of the Dallas-based company, heard about it, he decided to extract his employees regardless of cost. He ordered his lawyers to meet the bail, and he recruited a strike team of volunteers from the executives led by a retired U.S. Army officer, Arthur D. Bull Simons, to break them out by force if necessary. And that team then flew to Tehran. On 11 February 1979, Tehran street crowds erupted. Among them was a young Iranian named Rashid, an ambitious young Iranian systems engineering trainee at EDS. Now, loyal to his American employers, Rashid was eager to help them win the release of their jailed colleagues. Ken Follett wrote the book On the Wings of Eagles about this jailbreak and records Rashid's instigation of the mob's attack on the Qasr prison, which we have visited before, QASR. Gaylord and Schiaparoni are the names of the two Americans that they had thrown in there. And so when that mob attacked Qasr prison, all the prisoners ran out, including Gaylord and Schiaparoni. A few hours later, they met at Simon's room in the Hyatt Crown Hotel in Tehran. The escape from prison was easier than exiting the country. The police wanted Gaylord and Schiaparoni. Neither had passports, so could not depart legally. Simons divided the remaining EDS employees in Tehran into two groups. The less suspicious, the unwanted, those still with passports, were to leave via airplanes from Tehran for Islamabad. The more vulnerable, including the two fugitives, were to go to Turkey in two Range Rovers. Rashid accompanied the latter group on their 450-mile-long trip across northwest Iran. In 2 days of driving, they came repeatedly close to capture. On every occasion, Rashid's quick wit saved them. When he and the 6 Americans crossed the Turkish border, they were met by an EDS employee waiting with a bus and taken to a chartered plane. On the 17th of February of 1979, they reached Istanbul, where an anxious Rosborough had been pacing up and down his hotel room. The fugitive pair lacked passports and had entered Turkey illegally, so this rendered even the Turkish portion of their journey somewhat risky. On the same day the overland team reached Istanbul, the other EDS employees left Tehran by plane, barely escaping the same prosecutor who had earlier jailed their colleagues. The two teams met in Frankfurt, Germany, and flew together via an emergency landing in England to the United States, and all of them, including Rashid, arrived in Texas on February 18th. Afterwards, in 1981, the Majlis, dominated by the Islamic Republican Party, forced Bani Sadr out of office. This kicked off a wave of protests and demonstrations from a broad spectrum of Iranian civil society. Bani Sadr later fled the country. Armed revolutionary committees loyal to Ayatollah Khomeini, called the Pasdaran, arrested many thousands of youth and activists from both nationalist and leftist groups Lajivardi, who was known as the hanging judge, and executed all of them later on. At this point in the history of the Tudeh party, the Christian and Azeri speakers within the population were prominent, while other leftist parties opposed the Islamist forces at this time and were suppressed as a result. The Tudeh party leadership, as well as the Fadian Aksariyat, took a different tack. They decided to oppose the older regime politically with the newer clerical theocratic regime and supported the crackdown on the militant armed opposition. This would prove to be a fatal error. In 1982, the Islamist government closed down the Tudeh newspaper and purged Tudeh members from government ministries, and according to the Metrokin archive by Vladimir Kazukin, a KGB officer stationed in Tehran, who had defected to the British in 1982, it was MI6 and the CIA that directed this attack from the regime against the Tudeh party. The government arrested and imprisoned the Tudeh leadership and more than 10,000 members of the party. During February 1983, when the leaders of the Tudeh party were arrested and the party disbanded, Iran was effectively left with a one-party state. The Tudeh arrests revealed that again the party had managed to find supporters among the armed forces, as a number of officers prominent among them included Admiral Bahram Afzali, commander of the Iranian Navy, were all arrested. These arrests ended with the alliance between the Tudeh party and the ruling clergy of Iran, and the Iranian government proclaimed the Soviets to be atheistic devils. The international cap press announced the banning of the Tudeh party. 18 Soviet diplomats were expelled from the country for blatant interference. The Tudeh was accused of working on behalf of foreign powers, and its suppression was praised by Khomeini. The base of this Islamic movement is what the Russians called kulaks, the mullah class of people that run the villages. Because of these purges, a great number of party members left the country, going into exile. As the party represented the Soviet view of a preferred leftist movement holds a pro-Soviet ideological line in response to Soviet foreign policy in a supportive manner, the Soviet Union was likely disappointed at the development. It is likely many hundreds of Tudeh prisoners were killed during the 1988 executions of Iranian political prisoners, when thousands of mujahideen and leftist prisoners were killed. One report lists 90 Tudeh killed in Evan and Gohardasht prisons. Despite being banned, the party managed to survive. Of course, individuals found to be affiliated with communist or socialist groups were and are arrested, killed, or imprisoned. Nevertheless, many cadre operate as an underground political organization in Iran to this very day. And today the party leadership is mainly based in exile, as is the new Central Committee elected in 1992. The party has taken positions against privatization, criticized the electoral system in the country, and anti-labor legislation, and in 2017 the party supported Jean-Luc Mélenchon as a leftist force in France, commemorated the Russian Revolution, pledged solidarity with the Venezuelan Communist Party, and criticized Iranian reformists for betraying their ideas. Additionally, the party condemned the missile attacks on Syria in April 2017 by Donald Trump's administration, the only element of the Iranian opposition to do so, and has many wide-ranging party anthems on their website. And that brings us to the last of our lectures on Iran, and the volume on South and Southwest Asia, which is volume 5. Next, I'm going to be giving a series of lectures on Turkey, and after that, I'm going to have to take a break while I put all of this together for publication as the 5th volume this summer in the series.